A bipartisan House duo have proposed legislation to create a federally sanctioned third-party anti-Semitism monitor, a monitor for select college campuses that are federally funded. Here with the details, the co-authors of the legislation, Democrat Congressman Ritchie Torres and Republican Congressman Mike Lawler, both represent the state of New York. Let's start with Congressman Lawler, or either one, whoever feels more strongly. How many different methods or legislation did you gentlemen kick around before deciding on this strategy? Because I don't know what we need to do, to be honest, Congressman Lawler.
Well, I think this requires a multi-pronged approach. Today, we're actually going to be voting on a bill that I introduced last year, along with Congressman Torres and Gottheimer and Moskowitz, that would require the Department of Education to adopt the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism for all of its Title VI discrimination enforcement cases under the Civil Rights Act. But that's just one piece of legislation. Obviously, the bill that Congressman Torres introduced and that I'm co-leading, the Columbia Act, is another vehicle by which to really ensure that these institutions are cracking down on anti-Semitism on campuses all across this country by allowing the department to install a third-party monitor to make sure that they are adhering to the Civil Rights Act and enforcing Title VI.
And Congressman Torres, your comments?
Yeah, so, Title VI prohibits discrimination, harassment, and intimidation against all students, including Jewish students, and the purpose of the monitorship is to enforce the law. The status quo is fundamentally failing Jewish students on college campuses, as evidenced by the madness that took hold on Columbia University. And if we do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. So we need a new model of enforcement in which there will be a federal monitor on site who can see the facts on the grounds with his own eyes and then report whether a particular university is in compliance with the law.
Congressman Torres, in your view, is the issue nuanced at all? I'm talking about between expressions of free speech and the right to protest, which is so uniquely American. And that's what I hear again and again. I always hear the caveats that, we're unhappy with what's happening, but certainly and I heard the Biden administration say it yesterday, his press secretary, that we even urge protests and demonstrations at commencement exercises, if that's what you want to do. So it's a weird line, or fine line to try to walk.
Look, I agree with you, except there's a difference between free expression and intimidation. There's a difference between free expression and harassment. And what we're witnessing in places like Columbia University is the creation of a hostile environment for Jews on college campus in violation of Title VI. And keep in mind, there is no First Amendment right to blockade entrances. There's no First Amendment right to vandalize property. There's no First Amendment right to hold people hostage and harass and intimidate Jews. Those are not activities protected by the First Amendment. Those are crimes punishable by law.
We've seen this many times in the past, Congressman Torres, and where I was going with this, and there is a piece, lead editor in the Wall Street Journal, America's New Mob Rule, and pointing, things happen gradually and then all at once, obviously, but there is some finger pointing by the opinion writers at the Journal. The left increasingly resorts to fomenting disorder to get its way. They go back to the Occupy Wall Street movement. They even go so far as to say that post-George Floyd, that the left used that murder to trigger and then condone riots in numerous cities. Do you think that's part of the problem here or not? Do you think there's any blame to be ascribed to progressive politics?
Look, I mean, extremism is not an exclusively left-wing phenomenon. There's extremism both on the far right and on the far left. And we have an obligation to condemn extremism, no matter what form it takes and no matter what ideological direction from which it comes. So I've been consistent in speaking out against both the far left and the far right.
Congressman Torres, What do you think about the professors at Columbia who are engaged in this activity, which may very well be different? You may put them in a different category than the students. Do you think they should go?
Look, I mean, if you have either a professor or a student who's violating university policy or breaking the law, I mean, there should be accountability. There should be consequences, of course. And I'm concerned that our college campuses are indoctrinating the next generation of Americans with not only a hatred for Israel, but also a hatred for their own country.
Right.
And I'm not aware of a civilization in human history that has succeeded on the strength of self-loathing.
Right. That's a good point.
But does that mean these professors need to be fired, the ones that are engaged in this? And
look, I think what we need is decisive leadership. I mean, if the president had made it crystal clear that if you fail to vacate the encampment, you're going to face expulsion, or you're going to face a revocation of your visa, or you're going to face firing, when you have a credible threat of accountability and follow through on those threats, then this situation could have been resolved decisively. But once there's a crisis of confidence in the leader of the university, then chaos ensues. But I'll defer to Mike.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Look, when you look at this situation at Columbia, I went there last week. I met with President Shafiq, and she said it was a mistake to call in the cops at the initial encampment, and that they were trying to negotiate. And I, along with my colleague Anthony D'Esposito and Speaker Johnson, made it clear to her that you cannot negotiate here. You need to act decisively, and you need to make it very clear that this is unacceptable. In 1969, Father Hesburgh, the president of Notre Dame, sent a letter to both faculty and students and made it clear that, yes, you have a right to protest. Yes, you have a right to offer your opinion and oppose decisions made by the government. However, the moment those protests turn violent, either physically or verbally, you lose that right. And that they would have 15 minutes to cease and desist or face suspension, expulsion, and or arrest. And I think President Shafiq failed in her obligation to ensure the safety and well-being of all students, but in particular Jewish students who were under attack and threat and afraid to come onto campus, and allowed this situation to get out of control. You have to act decisively, as my colleague just said. You cannot be weak-kneed in these moments, and unfortunately, that's what we've seen on many of these campuses across America, which is why it is so critical to enforce the law and why Congress is taking steps to do that.